Welcome to Business Game Changers. I'm Sarah Westall. I have Ole Damagard back, and he brought his good friend Cody Snodgrass with him as well. And Cody has been a black ops with the CIA for over 2 decades, and he came out and became a whistleblower. And he is here to share some of that information with us today. And we also talk about, the huge upsurge in activity, false flag activity or terror activity in August, what that means. And we talk about in general where things are going. And Cody gives us his experience with that, what goes on behind the scenes, what it means to be a black ops, and how the media is involved and heavily involved. And then they stay after, and we talk about mind control and censorship and how that comes together and what that means and the apathy of the people. And that's for my Patreons, and you can get that at the link below. And so I appreciate my Patreons, I really do. So anybody who is a member, I really appreciate you. And there is a lot of exclusive content for you. And we talk a lot, and I can't get to all the messages that I get from all my different sources, but I really try to get to my Patreons first. So thank you so much for being there. And I also want to remind you of an upcoming cancer summit that is going to be free, and it starts at the end. Well, I have the start dates here. I have the link below, and it's all about what we know about cancer. Obviously, what we know about cancer is a lot different than what you're going to hear in the mainstream media. So if you have any loved ones or anybody you know who has cancer, or you want to be prepared, because 1 in 6 people get cancer now? It's a ridiculous statistic. And we know how to deal with cancer. We know how to heal people from getting cancer. And these are the experts, the cutting edge information on cancer. It's all free, and I'll have the information below for you. So let's get into my interview now with Ole and Cody. Hi, Ole and Cody. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for inviting us.
I should let Cody just say thank you here quick.
Oh, no, it's wonderful, to be here. Thank you, guys. It's an honor to be with Ole, and it's great to be with you, Sarah.
Well, I took a little bit of break. I went and visited my son, and I took a little bit of break, so I'm refreshed. I was excited. I'm like, I get to talk to Ole, and he had so many good comments to say about you, Cody. But I was just like, this is a good one to come back to, because you're such a kind soul, and I just, with all the dark things I cover, it's really nice to have somebody that it's like, somebody who's kind and that I know is kind, and that we can just, it's a good one to come back to. But I wanted to talk about your background, Cody, and how you and Ole met.
Would that be okay if I answer that first and then Cody comes in?
Absolutely.
Because about it's almost a year and a half ago, I was contacted by Cody by email, and it was I get a lot of strange emails from all over the place, and here was another one. And then there was this guy called Cody here who said that he had been a black op private contractor for more than 20 years. That it had come to a point where he was involved in so many different operations. And at the end of his career, when he was starting to suffer from all kinds of post-traumatic traumas, stress syndrome, and also problems with alcohol and drugs because of the high pressure that had been for so many years, he was offered the job to blow off the Alfred P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City. The one that then was blown up a year later. He turned it down because of patriotic reasons, but also because he felt that it was a patsy job. The pay was so low compared to this type of job.
And it was, wasn't it? That was the patsy.
And at that time, he turned from an asset into a liability. And after that, he was exposed to several attacks, and he died twice. He flatlined twice, where he had a near-death experience. Where the second time he died, he came up and he met his angel. He saw the whole madness what he had been involved in, and he met his angel, and together with his angel, who offered him to go back down and say, we got a lot of hard work in front of us if you're up for it. And if you are, then I'll join you. And Cody accepted, and boom, down they came. And this, I hope you don't mind me saying so, Cody, but that is why Cody often refers to himself as we, because it's him and his angel. So it's like very interesting combo of a former black op that has been involved in all kinds of horrific stuff, now joined by an angel helping to lift the world. So when he told me his story, I said, I'll do anything I can to help you step forward as a whistleblower, because he had kept quiet. He had kept under the radar for more than 20 years, waiting for the Clintons to get out of the White House, because he had done some work under them, and he knew that if they were still in power, then his day would be counted very easily. So we prepared for some months, and the only safety net you have, or the only type of security you have in a situation like that when you step forward as a whistleblower with explosive info from the inside, is to pump it out there to as many as possible, as fast as possible. So we lined up 3 to 5 shows per day, and then the day we were gonna start, it was November last year. And the very day we were going to begin with the very first one, somebody fried his laptop. It was hit by some kind of thing that almost smoke came out of it. But we continued, and then we did, I don't know how many different shows together. Like I called Cody normally at 5 a.m., and then we just went from there. And so he has delivered incredible information. I think he's one of the most important whistleblowers, and with such knowledge from the inside, in the belly of the beast. I mean, people like myself, we are walking around guessing, trying to figure out how they're doing it. Through Cody, you can get direct info, so it's so valuable. And then also with such a beautiful person, because this is who he is.
The cannabis industry is expected to grow from $150 million in 2018 to over $57 billion by the year 2027. This is a ground floor opportunity, and Greenflower has a free ebook showing the 500 best jobs available in this huge expanding market. Click the link below to learn more and to get your free copy. So, Cody, when you were doing these black ops, were you aware that at first, maybe eventually were you aware that they were false flags and they weren't legitimate? I mean, as for what they say they were going to do? I mean, were they lying to you?
You mean, did you say false flag?
Well, yeah, when you were doing black ops, were they lying to you as far as what the purpose and intent of all these things were?
Oh, well, a lot of times we did not know the purpose or intent. We operated under standard black ops procedure where the information was compartmentalized, and a lot of times we wouldn't know who our contacts were. They're people we never saw, we never knew them, but we had a code, and we just used a code, and that's how we knew that our contact was there. So, yeah, it's to minimize blowback in case anyone gets caught or tortured, or you don't have any information to give up. It's a need to know operational basis. That's what a lot of black ops are. So it protects you as well. But when did you start figuring out that you were a deep state operative doing things that were not, that started leading into your depression and all you realize that I'm not doing what I should be doing? Yeah, when I started out, you start out generally, with lower level assignments and stuff, and then if you can stay alive and you accomplish your missions and you minimize the blowback and your principals are happy with your work, then your word spreads and your name gets around to certain people, and you get more and more jobs. And depending on what the jobs are and the level of complexity, you have an inkling a lot of times in the back of your mind that they are false flags, or they're going to be a patsy op, like the Oklahoma City bombing. And you know these things, but you have to weigh that against the amount of money you're making, and how deep the operation is going to go, and the risks. There's always risks. We did some bodyguard work. We did a lot of different things, and some of the risk was real high. So it's a hard question to ask. It's kind of like saying, how long's a string?
Mm. So, but for a while, did you feel like you were being a hero, like you were a patriot, really doing things for your country?
Sometimes.
Oh.
And sometimes, we didn't have the luxury of having that much information. We had a specific mission to accomplish, like taking something from point A to point B, and we tried not to engage in speculation or anything like that. We were too busy focusing on the operational requirements of whatever the Black Op was.
Okay. And so, but was there a point where you started to realize?
Yes.
Okay. And how long into your career did you start realizing it? I mean, at some point you're kind of deep in and did you feel like you couldn't get out? So, okay, so how far were you in? And at what point did you feel like you couldn't get out? Both questions.
Yeah. It just depends on what you know going into the operation. I mean, it depends on what you're told ahead of time and then what you see when you're in the middle of it. And there's a lot of times, we felt like we were never going to get out. There's a lot of times I didn't think I'd survive to end the mission. So, and then in the case of what Ole was talking about on my near-death experience, that was in Project Slammer, and I died twice in the hospital there, and I had to shoot back. But that was a covert assassination program with the CIA, and there were times in the middle of that I never thought I'd make it out. I never thought I'd stay alive.
Wow. Okay. So what were some of the assignments that you were involved in that we might know about?
Well, you won't know about them because we have a thing in Black Ops, that it's the old thing like the CIA says, our failures you hear about, our successes you never do. And so if you conduct a Black Op correctly, almost nobody knows about it except the people who are involved directly in it and the principals who hire the particular operation out. And, the civilians in whatever country you're in or the area that you're operating in, nobody knows about it. Unless
it's like an explosion on a subway or something, right?
Oh, sure. Like the Murrah building, that was a Black Op, but they had to have a cover for the operation. And, so it depends on what you're doing. It depends on how high level it is. If it's just a bodyguard operation, you don't have to worry too much about covering your tracks. But if it's something high level, like the Murrah building, you've got to have a cover to a cover. You've got to have media control. You've got to have a lot of help controlling subordinates and investigators and so forth. So it really just depends on what the op is. But we did a lot of different kinds. We moved ordnance. We moved military ordnance that had been, black market stuff in the Mena, Arkansas thing when we were involved in CI Operation Centaur Rose down there, arming the Contras in Nicaragua. All that story's in the book that I wrote, Choosing the Light, Dark Secrets of the Oklahoma City Bombing. And we tell the story about all that and how they were moving the cocaine and the drugs back. We moved a lot of ordnance. We bodyguarded people. We did security on safe houses and high-level Black Ops. We also did black-on-black stuff where they'd have a Black Op going somewhere, and it went south or went sideways in the middle of it. And so to minimize any further blowback, they call guys like us in, and we were black-on-black. And we were sent in to clean up a Black Op that went sideways. So some of it gets real deep, and some of it's pretty straightforward.
Well, how involved is the media? Is it a complete controlled media?
I would say the mainstream media, Time Warner, all those guys, it's very highly controlled. They began all that back with Operation Mockingbird, and back in the 50s and stuff. And at one point, the CIA director said in Congress at the Frank Church hearings that they had at one point 400 or so agents and all in Operation Mockingbird. Some people know about this, some people don't, but CIA is heavily involved. They infiltrated our American media here, and then they've done it all around the world, and they use strategic deception and propaganda. But I'd say the mainstream medias in America here are heavily controlled. The information is controlled at the source, and one of their standard tactics is to put out they put out 80% truth in a news story, and they get people hooked on, listening to it. They check a few facts, and it all looks good on the surface, and then they slip in the 20% propaganda or 20% lie, and they're real good at that, masters of it.
Now, does anybody ever go rogue? Do they just get fired right away if they go rogue and actually try to tell the truth?
Sure. There's a whole lot of people who see things that go on, and then they have to weigh their careers, their pension,
like
family.
Greg Hunter and all these people that used to work there, they just can't stand it.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of people that see the darkness and see the deception, and it revolts them in their spirits, and they just can't take it anymore. And yeah, that leads to drinking, and can also lead to real suicide. It can also lead to murder that's made to look like suicide if they talk too much, But yeah, in the media, it's highly controlled here, and the alternate media, like what you're doing, and some of the other guys like Greg Hunter and the rest of them, they have a more. They're not on the corporate chain, of advertising dollars being held over their heads and pensions being lost and threatened, and a lot of guys that sign the national security oath. Some of them are CIA agents, and their fronts being a journalist or a photographer, say for the New York Times, and they're actually sitting agents. But they can't tell anyone that because they've signed a national security oath, and they can't even talk about it, or they go to Leavenworth.
But do you think there's some sitting agents now in the alternative media? Is it obvious to you who they are?
Sometimes it's not obvious because these guys are pretty good. They're chosen, for their ability to remain undercover, okay, and to fade whatever type of investigations happen. But you have to watch them for a while generally, because like I said, they'll put out, if they're going to put an undercover agent in the alternate media and they want to infiltrate the Patriot movement or the Truth Tellers or whatever, or those architects for 9/11 that are trying to figure out what happened at the World. Those guys, they come in, they do some hard-hitting stories, they seem to get the truth out, and then after a while, people, you drop your guard because you want to believe some of the stuff. Yeah. What they're doing the whole time is keeping lists of all the people who are and what websites they're going to, and they're putting it all in a big computer, just like Edward Snowden tried to warn us about Facebook surveillance and all that kind of stuff. But yes, there's definitely undercover agents scattered through the whole media, whether it be the alternate media or the normal NBC, Fox News, CNN type of thing.
Now, how can people learn who they are? I mean, people think, I get accused of that, and I wish I had the paycheck that came for being part of the CIA. But it's a legitimate concern for people, because I think I'm a little bit more professional, and so I'm really serious about doing this, and I really care, and I can't back off. And so people sometimes are like, why the heck is somebody like her up there doing this? And I could see, I'd be questioning that. But so it's a legitimate question. What can people look for when they're looking over and not be fooled and say, okay, this is, because it's the same thing for me. I get my sources. I'm like, well, are they real or not? And so what can people do and make sure they're not taken for a ride?
Well, that's a good question. And, what I always tell people is, learn to listen with your heart, not just your mind. Okay. We're the most powerful as human beings when our mind and bodies and spirits are all aligned together. If your consciousness unified instead of fractured That's when you're your most powerful. And when you're at your most power as a human, like you have woman's intuition, Sarah, you can kind of feel, when someone's BSing you or not. You got this little feeling inside of you. Another thing people can do is to cross-reference many sources. There's a lot of open source material that's not classified that gets out on the internet. And if it's not on one website or one article, it may be in another. And so we tell people to cross-reference as many intelligence sources as you can, okay? And then go, look through it all, get a general consensus, and you can weed out a lot of the propaganda and the deception by doing that. And then, of course, in the end, you have to go by your own feeling and your own heart, because the CIA and the KGB, the FSB, MI6, Mossad in Israel, all these intelligence agencies are masters of propaganda. They're masters of strategic deception, and they're masters at using the media in their particular country to mold public opinion, and even go so far as mind controlling their civilian bases. So it's a good question, and the answer I have is to listen to that little voice inside, and then do heavy research. Like go to Ole's website. He's got that vault. It's 30 years of his research, and you can get into that. You can get into different websites and different places and really bore down. And if you really want to, you can file your own Freedom of Information request if you have the time and money. You know how it goes, Sarah, how they give you the big government runaround on a lot of that stuff.
Well, a lot of people don't have that time. I mean, they're just trying to work and take care of their families, and they have a little bit of time after work to sit and do this, relax and learn. They really don't have the time to figure out who's legit and not legit. It's driving people crazy, being honest.
Sarah, I'm a former journalist. I say former because I used to be proud of calling myself a journalist, but the way I see it, there's very few left, at least in what we call the real media. And I met up with a man just a few months ago who had 40 years as a journalist. He's been working for CNN, BBC. He was part of starting Al Jazeera. And he was in Hong Kong when Snowden and so on stepped forward. A real heavyweight, a real veteran as a newspaper man. But he was so depressed, and just like Cody said, he was just, it was eating him from inside, because he said, we're not journalists anymore. There are no journalists left. It's all taken over. It has to be the fastest and delivered right away. Nobody's checking out any facts. It's just standing like with near a sewage opening and just aim it in whatever direction. Nobody's checking. It's just flowing right through. And he said it has nothing to do with journalism anymore. So he was deeply depressed, I tell you. And this is what I call a real journalist. He was sort of one of the old school that really dug into stuff, heavy hitter. He said he could get a job anywhere in the world, top pay, but it was eating him alive from inside.
Yeah, who wants to get top pay just to be a puppet propagandist for the government and not...
Lots of people do.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying you're selling your soul. That's the example of selling your soul. And it's... The whole point of journalism is to root out evil, I think. I really do. I think that's the whole point of it, and to bring light to people, because I bring a lot of things on the edge of science and say how things are changing, but things are changing so quickly that we have to be smart about it, because it could really, it could go really great or not so great, and let's get our hands on this. And I want to bring things that can help people, because people are suffering everywhere. But that being said, a journalist is really a fourth pillar of a healthy community. In our community, if you have three pillars in the government, or you can say as the government's one pillar and media is the second pillar. If you want a healthy community, you need that journalism going in and rooting out what the hell is going on.
And that needs to be separate from the government, because the government are one of the sources or the forces that needs to be held under personal responsibility, keep the light right at them, saying, we see what you're up to, just stop all of this crap and do what you're supposed to do. That, I would say, is a major task of the media, to keep them in control and see that everything is the way it should be, expose whatever corruption that is. But nowadays, it's come to a ridiculous point. It's been so hijacked. And when I look as a former journalist, I think what we're doing are what journalists are supposed to do. I mean, but they don't do it, so we have to do it. Yeah. It's the same with the police. It's the same with the government. They're not doing what they're supposed to do, so we have to do it ourselves. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty tired, and so so I would love them to just step up, do what they're supposed to do, and let's get this whole thing back in balance.
That's why I took a vacation a little bit here. It was refreshing. I didn't do anything. I just stopped. It was really good. But let's talk about August, because that's one of the things that we talked about. Is August had this huge surge of false flags. So what's going on? What are the false flags that are out there, and why?
Okay, for one, oh, sorry, Cody, go for it.
No, I just wanted to back up for just a second. A lot of people don't understand. We're talking about the journalists, how far it's gone. This CIA Operation Mockingbird started back in the late 40s and the 50s, when television was replacing radio. And in 1948, Congress passed the Smith-Mundt Act, which authorized the U.S. State Department to disseminate propaganda outside the U.S., but specifically forbade it to do so inside. So in response, the CIA formed a black op that Congress didn't know about, and they called it Operation Mockingbird. And their idea was to plant disinformation in the U.S. media, and it was a classic counterintelligence tactic, okay? And they worked with the 4th Psychological Operations Group at Fort Bragg and so forth, doing PSYOPs. And at one point they had 400 CIA agents were active in the media to doctor the stories and change them and make things favorable to the CIA and the Black Ops community. And it included Frank Wisner, the Washington Post, Richard Helms. There was ABC, CBS, NBC, UPI, Scripps Howard, Copley News Service, Associated Press, Hearst newspapers, Reuters, et cetera, et cetera. And this also was going on, Sarah, back in the 50s, and now they fine-tuned it like Ole's talking about. They're using supercomputers and photoshopped pictures and all kinds of stuff as an extension of this program, and it's still going on now. So yeah, the media, what we're getting into in August, like you're talking about, there are masters at using the media after a false flag. Okay, they can plant evidence pre and post operation, and then let the media and their control of the media take up any slack. If they make a mistake or do something really silly, they can cover it up with the media. And so.
Well, it's like the shooting in Florida, the school shooting. They had black ops on camera leaving the school with bags, and nobody even mass media didn't question it. And then if you questioned it in the alternative media, YouTube was shutting you down, or you were being called a conspiracy theorist nut job. It's like, well, why wouldn't we be asking what that is? We're a nut job by asking what that is? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's how they do it. And the CIA came up with...
it's ridiculous. Well, the Smith-Mundt Act has been, in 2012, they made it legal in the United States to do propaganda. They expanded it. Why did they feel the need to make it legal now in this country versus doing it as a black op?
Well, they're
because then they can get away with murder.
Because then it could be in our face. I mean, then they didn't have to worry about it. It was cheaper. I don't know.
It is in our face. No, but now it's illegal to fool us anymore. So they can't be made responsible for these false flags that are being pulled off all the time.
Maybe because it was becoming too known that they were doing this, so they have to make it legal so that there isn't any repercussions. Do you think that could be the reason?
That's the thing. That's the thing. But who would do a thing like that? Criminals do things like that. Yeah, so
Yeah, so we're dealing with criminals, so you can't really have, because they're criminals, it's hard to have a logical reasoning around this. Everything's illogical because they're criminals.
and, and,
You're cutting out a little bit. You're cutting out.
number of
Oh, you're cutting out. Oli, you're cutting out. Are you there?
there was school
Oh.
speak to go.
Oli, okay, you got to restate that because you cut out that whole time.
Okay, nowadays there's so much that is absolutely upside down. I mean, the ones we think we can trust are the ones that are actually doing these horrible stuff to us, and so on many times. And also the numbers of crime statistics, and also the numbers of alleged school shootings in the US. I think it was last year there were 235 reported. That's 235. That's a hell of a lot. So when starting to check it out, it turns out that there were actually 11 reported, and multiple of those were false flags. So how many real school shootings were there really? That is a major question that should be asked, because so much of this, what we are looking at, is just not true. That's the whole thing. It's just not true. And as one of the things that you have to look out for is when you're not allowed to ask questions. What is that? The truth, fear no investigation. So why are they trying to shut you down? Why are they shutting down YouTube videos about false flags? Why are they shutting down Cody's and my interviews like almost within 24 hours, 48 hours? Boom, they're gone.
That's what people have to question. And I don't mean to interrupt you, and people hate it when I interrupt, but whenever there's questions, like Jake Morphonios going to the Las Vegas thing with all those journalists, and they kicked him out because they didn't want him asking questions. And then the journalists that were in the room wanted them to ask questions before they kicked him out. They were asking because they couldn't ask the questions. So they were having the other, the independents ask the question. Whenever they stopped, like the Florida shooting, when you couldn't ask about those black ops leaving with a bag outside of the school. Whenever they say, or they make you into an idiot for asking legitimate questions, then you know there's a problem.
Totally. And
Do you want to save some serious money? Learn how a simple gadget can double your gas mileage while creating less pollution. This simple gadget does all of this while giving your car more power and longer engine life. Learn more with the link below.
And by the way, Sarah, I predicted that one 2 months before it happened. We've been looking into these different false flag templates and so on. And one of the things, what they do is they leave hidden clues about upcoming events, which sounds absolutely bizarre, but it turns out that it's actually the truth. And this is why I've been able to do that over the years. I'm up to 15 now, I think, that I predicted on international radio up to 2 months before they happened. So how is that possible if these were just acts that happened, like a crazy young teenager that went amok and started shooting people? How is it possible to predict these things if they were not planned months ahead? And also, I really found what I call a massive smoking gun around this whole Florida thing, because there was right after it happened on the 14th of February, on Valentine's Day, and just a little more than 1 month later, there was the so-called March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C., which was like hundreds of thousands of people were in the center of Washington, D.C., the capital of the U.S., where you have to ask yourself, it is officially, it was said that it was like a handful of teenagers that stood up with people like David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez in the forefront. very, very well prepared, doing press conferences right away. Everything was like, boom, websites were up, the Twitter things, everything
They're too
was prepared.
organized.
And then in less than 5 weeks, they had that. So one of my sources contacted Homeland Security and asked, "Is really how long would it take to get a permission, just a permission for such a march?" And it turns out that the normal one is 180 days. That's 180 days. So my contact emailed a man at the Homeland Security Bureau. His name is Officer Scott C. Earhart, badge number 2372. He's the Homeland Security Bureau, Special Operations Division, Planning and Logistics, the Metropolitan Police Department in New York. New York Avenue in Washington, D.C. And what he answered was, "Good morning. In reference to your inquiry concerning the March for Our Lives demonstration here in the District of Columbia on March 24, 2018, MPD received a permit application several months prior to the actual event. And there were several months of planning to this large event. If you are requesting additional information reference to this event, please follow the below steps to file a Freedom Act request." So what does that tell you? That it tells you exactly that this was not just a random act of violence. This was a massive false flag planned months ahead, and where the demonstration in Washington, D.C. was not by these teenagers. It was actually a TV producer, very well known. Her name is Dina Katz, and she's, among other things that she's a producer of, is Dancing with the Stars. Also the Women's March in Washington, D.C. And when you see the backing, the funding of this whole thing, to be able to get all of this sorted and fixed and prepared in less than 5 weeks, it takes a massive amount of people, lots of experience, lots of money. And when you track it down, there's so many of these organizations connected to George Soros that are just backing the whole thing, including George Clooney, who is Council on Foreign Relations, one of the voices from there. So what does that tell you? It was not a real event. Absolutely not.
I don't know why these people sell their souls. It's like they're lining up to sell their souls. Sign me up. I'll do bad stuff for money. I don't care. It's like, gosh. I mean, I can't question. I can't question people who are starving and can't take care of their kids. Okay. I'm not going to judge you. But for all these rich a-holes in this country who line up and are ready to sell their souls for money, when you can live very well and be a good person, that there's something wrong with them.
But Cody, please tell us about what are the how powerful are these desires that can make you go into
Well, I'm
these
sorry,
areas?
Cody, and you might be somebody that had that. So you tell me why. Just because I don't understand it, you tell me why you got out of it and you became a better person. So I'm sure there's other people just like you who are like, they want to get out so bad and they're stuck. So can you talk about that?
Oh yeah, I appreciate it. It's there's so many. What Ola and I and other researchers and people are trying to do, Sarah, is to help other whistleblowers and other people who, like you said, have seen so much stuff, and it just makes you sick in your heart, and you want to talk, but you can't, and it's all secret. And for me, and my thing when I was young, I was greedy for money. You know, my base pay was $20,000 a month cash. You know, we never put things in the bank or anything like that. There was no paper trails or any kind of things. And then some jobs we had were $50,000 a month, and we were on call a lot. And other months we made more than that per month, depending on if we ran a side operation on the existing op that we were on. But my motivation was greed. And then when I got into it and I saw more and more of it, and I have severe PTSD now. I used to have bad dreams about some of the things we'd done. And then when I had my near-death experience and I died in the hospital during Project Slammer, I realized, that we're spiritual beings of light and that this earth life is temporary. and there's a higher, bigger thing. And I came back. I totally changed. It took a near-death experience for me to wake up to the higher levels of truth and light. And so I had a spiritual experience. And I had been drinking heavily towards the end of my operational effectiveness, and that covered my PTSD and stuff. But I was greedy for money. You know, I used to have Cadillac limousines and Mercedeses and all kinds of stuff. And, you know, the money is addicting. It's like a drug when you have lots of it and you're dealing with it. And the power that comes, you know, with holding a silenced machine gun over somebody's head or something, that power trip, some people really get off on that because it strokes your ego. So there's greed and power and money are the dark sides of our ego and our lower nature. And that's what I succumbed to. And then later on, after I died, I realized, you know, there's a higher, bigger thing. And that's what worked for me. Some people never get out of it, though, Sarah. You see them, and they're so evil. They're so dark. They get so caught up in it. You know, a penthouse apartment and 3 swimming pools and 2 helicopters is not good enough. They got to have 4 helicopters or 2 jets. And no matter how much money they get, they want more and more and more and more. And they're never satisfied, no matter what. And it's actually a form of psychosis. It's a sickness, like a gambler who cannot stop gambling, or a drug addict who cannot stop shooting heroin, no matter what he does. And so to those people, you know, they're hopelessly caught up in the dark side. And this is a spiritual war, you know, between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. And we have to stand for the light, and the people that are doing the dark stuff, they have to do whatever they're doing. But it's a big question, and it's very deep. And one answer that works for one person, you know, may not necessarily work for another.
Well, and I think most people can relate to that greed and money thing as when we're coming out of our teenage years. A lot of us are like that because that's kind of what we're geared for. We're geared for making money, for being successful, getting a career. And, you know, we're not training people to be looking at success in a more holistic way.
Right.
Right? I mean,
it's
success is... Go ahead.
It's the overall pervasiveness of the material, you know, Western model, where you take deficit finance trips on your credit card to Walmart, and even though you might have 20 pairs of shoes in your closet, you go buy a couple of more because they're on sale. And we've all been inundated with the propaganda and the subliminals, even the black and white TVs back in the 50s and 60s. You know, some of that is subconscious. And you're right, we're all geared in a material, you know, if you got a Volkswagen, then get a Mercedes. If you got a Mercedes, then get a Ferrari. You know, and you just keep pushing and more and more and more. And that model is perpetrated, you know, by the bankers and the corporations that look at us as their chattel and as their slaves. And if they can mind control us to buy their products and stay in their system, you know, they've done their job quite well.
The cannabis industry is expected to grow from $150 million in 2018 to over $57 billion by the year 2027. This is a ground floor opportunity, and Greenflower has a free ebook showing the 500 best jobs available in this huge expanding market. Click the link below to learn more and to get your free copy.
Well, it's that mindset that allows them to be able to recruit people to do their work. But them seeing us as cattle is what allows them to use us for nefarious purposes, right? Because a lot of people can't believe that false flags or human trafficking or any of these horrible incidences, you know, ritual child sex abuse, all these things could possibly be going on. And the only way that you could actually understand it is to know that the people with that much power and money see you as cattle. They see you as things to utilize to make more money or to deal. They don't see you as people and human beings. They see like they use people.
But
They use animals. They use us.
Right.
yeah, but when you look at how we use animals, I mean, most
I
of
know.
us just see a walking hamburger instead of seeing this beautiful living creature who is here on the planet for a reason. But that's the way we are being brought up. If you're in India, you would never ever do anything bad to a cow, you know. So it's how are they brought up? It's just a different way. And most of the individuals that I encountered in the higher levels of, or come in contact through through other people, these people have often been broken down by their parents and also um, sort of brought up in a way so that when they look at us, they look at something worthless. I mean, we're not from the same, we look the same, but we're not the same in their mind.
Well, it's like a chicken or a cow, how we process them. They just see us as things they can process and use.
Totally.
That's
And also,
that's the only thing I can, relate it to of how they could get to that point.
yeah, and also when you see how easily manipulated we are, I mean, can you blame them for just if you're in it and you can control masses just like this, and
It's easy,
you
I
say
know.
go left and they go left, you say go right and they go right. You know, you wave some money here and with some money there, and they will just crawl around and do anything for you. Can you blame them for losing respect for us? I think not. So we have to regain our self-respect and all of these beautiful values, instead of just pointing blamingly at them because they're using us. We are letting them use us. And that is a major problem, I think.
I agree 100%. Well, let's talk about August, because we didn't get into that deep. We keep laughing because the false flags in August were off the charts. Why? Why is it off the charts, and where are we seeing it?
Well, why we're seeing it is like that you have to see the New World Order, the agenda, what is going on here, how they're trying to push us into a one world fascist state with a one world army there to control us, not to protect us, with a one world religion. They're trying to destroy all religions so that we will join under the New World Order religion type of thing. A one world digital currency, which is very, very dangerous, because then once the real money is gone and it's all digital, then whoever controls the chip in your card or the chip in your hand or whatever controls you. And this is where you see countries like Sweden now. It's very scary to see the money. The cash money is gone. It's like 98% gone. Banks don't deal with money. There's nothing. It's just gone. And this is where it's so easily controlled if somebody with a bad intention steps into power.
So are they ramping up with all these? Are they ramping up that agenda, or are they fearful that their agenda is being messed with? Or both?
No, I think it's I can only guess. I don't know from the inside, but what I do believe is that they're starting to show their ugly face here. These forces that have been behind the curtains for so many decades without most people noticing it, now it's suddenly they're showing themselves, because in a very brutal way, if you look like YouTube, Google, how they're just destroying and deleting websites right, left, and center. They're censoring. Why would they need to do that if they were so powerful?
Yeah, in
it's
this
because
country.
So many people.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but it's because so many millions of people are becoming aware of what's going on. And the more we become aware, we also start understanding how few they really are. And I would suggest they, in quotation signs, are in the thousands when you get into the real key positions in this whole brutal death machine that is trying to control us. And we, the free individuals, are absolute billions of people. So there's no balance whatsoever, meaning that the day then when we actually see what's going on, just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, and she pulls the curtain, and we see, my God, there's so few, and most of them really old, weak men with no power except our power. that they can only get control of through deception, through manipulation, and through fear. And this is why they need this, they have this incredible urge all the time for creating new dangers, new things to be afraid of, because that's the only hope they have to control us.
Well, what do you think of the new warning, or the new Trump named the month of September Disaster Preparedness Month or something? I don't remember exactly what he called it, but it's basically to get families prepared for disasters and to have a plan in case something happens, either a natural disaster or some kind of and to be ready. People think it's to be ready for the reset. People think it's is that something that's helpful for people, or do you think it's? I mean, what do you think about that?
If step one, how does it make you feel? It makes you scared. Okay,
so
that's the fear porn, big time. Not option two, it's a super good idea to be prepared, to have food at home, to have diesel or whatever stored, to have so that you are self-sufficient should anything go down. That is a perfect thing. So I would say prepare yourself, and then prepare for the worst and hope for the best, and keep the intention very high and your spirit very high. And so, have you ever heard a politician say a true word? I ask you, really.
No, you haven't. I think we have a lot of hope where we really want somebody to take down this deep state. And I mean, people just so bad want Trump to be for real and this Q thing to be for real.
But then
I know.
I say the same. I would love him to be that the savior on the white horse. But if he was that, why does he not see through so many of these false flags that are so easily, like exposed as what they are? Why does he keep standing up? We stand here in sympathy of the victims, yet another horrible thing. No, it's not another horrible thing. It's one and yet another thing, part of the agenda, which he also is part of, apparently. Otherwise, he would just see through that. He's got the best experts ever, the best advisors. He's got all kinds of super duper, all the money in the world, and he can't figure things out. That's a simple person like myself and other researchers.
Well, and I think you got a perfect point, and I think that's where people are. The people who really believe in Trump and his actions. I want to stay hopeful. It's kind of at the end where you got to start doing some things. Otherwise, it's hard to believe that this is really true. All these sealed indictments and stuff. Well, we got to start seeing some of these things. At some point, we can't just go on forever with a carrot on the end of a string. And then people who just don't believe it at all, you could probably get a lot of those people in your camp if you start doing it. But I mean, I can see where everybody's at with this. I mean, it's hard to believe anything.
I don't believe anything. I really am skeptic. I'm skeptic to everything that comes through mainstream media. I will say that is really horrible if it's true. Let me check it out first. That is very incredible, blah, 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 if it's true. I keep this question mark there because it's 35 years of my life that I thought I knew things. I mean, it's almost like an unlearning process on a daily basis where you just find new layers of deception and lies that are put on top of us and through history books that turns out to be manipulated, and it's so confusing. But if somebody really wanted to make a real difference in the world, it could go very fast. If the intention is pure, if the intention is right, things could move fast, very far.
Well, especially now.
Very fast.
Especially now, because there's more and more people awake.
Yeah.
And we have a media that, and if people really thought you were doing the right thing, you could have people lined up behind you left and right. I mean, it just has to...
Sarah,
go ahead.
Sarah, I don't know anything about money or finances and so on, but I spoke to this guy he's what you call a national economist in Sweden. He's very interested in international politics and economics and the whole thing. And we were sitting talking about, how to accomplish change in the world. And he said, do you know how long it would take with the right intention to get the world in balance financially? And I said, I don't know, 7 years. He said 48 hours. I mean, I don't know if he's just full of it, but just to say 48 hours, that gives me hope. If it's 7 months or something, if it's that fast with the right intention, I think that is incredible.
Well, I think
but
you can cut the snake.
So much.
You cut the head off the snake really quick. Bam.
It goes super fast with the right intention. With the right intention, and also when you release people out of debt that is created out of thin air, and get the shackles off them, countries out of this debt that is also created out of thin air, just to control them. Because it's not the money that these powers are after, it's the debt. It's through the debt that they can control it. That is where the real power is.
So, Cody, what do you think of all the false flags that are going on right now? Where do you think the world's at?
Well, we swim in a pool of organized deception. Just here in America, it's around the world. And New World Order elites, their main plan is to fragment our consciousness through fear. And it's a very clever process called gradualism. Just like, remember, Sarah, back in the 1960s, we had a spate of political assassinations, John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and so forth. And then you fast forward to, 2010, 2012, and now we've had a whole decade of school shootings, Parkland, Sandy Hook, it goes on and on. And they're using this process of gradualism, to create these events which instill fear, and they keep our consciousness fragmented. And so when we're fragmented, then we're not unified. And the people becoming aware of all this stuff and the mass arising of higher consciousness, that's what they're here to stop. They want to keep us dumbed down. They want to keep us controlled with fear. They want to keep us separate where we are all picking at each other and arguing about gun control and arguing about all these issues. Meanwhile, they just keep plying their ugly trade over and over and over. And until we wake enough people up and get them used to this paradigm, this kaleidoscope of fear that they're putting out, bombing, shootings, goes on and on, war, until we rise up against that and get enough people to see what they're doing, I think this stuff's going to continue. I think that here, after the midterm elections, United States, that they'll probably pull some other false flag. I've heard some people talking about October this year, just before the elections, of what you call an October surprise. There's no telling what these evil people will cook up. And it's just like a war, like Ole's talking about the debt. The bankers love war, and they don't care who wins a war. They don't care about political ideologies, left, right, Democrat, Republican, Muslim, Christian. They don't care about any of that. They care about the debt that the conflict produces, okay? And then they make money selling the arms on one side, and then after the war, like the Iran-Iraq war, that's a classic example, then they go back in afterwards and loan them more money to rebuild the infrastructure.
And then they control them at that point.
Right, until people wake up to this greed-based paradigm, and then all the stuff that comes downstream from it, like the pedophile rings and the heroin from Afghanistan, all the cocaine from South America, all the arms dealing, and all the worldwide arms, until the mass of people wake up to this stuff, then we're going to be victims of the games. We're going to be victims of their mind control. We're going to be victims of their strategic deception and their psychological operations. So we have to, that's what Ole and I know you are trying to do it, we're trying to just kind of gently wake people up and show them some things that aren't on the mainstream media. And it's an uphill battle because we're being censored, we're being threatened. We just have to try to fight these dark forces in the highest and best way we can without falling into a fear paradigm.
I agree with
when
that.
a false happens, we have to go out and look at the pictures and show everyone and go, what do you think? Here's the evidence. What do you think?
And stay on point. Stay at the evidence. Stay on point. Don't get sidetracked. I like to hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I like to believe in people. That's a hard thing to maintain, but I do. Because I don't want to go insane, but yeah, I know.
We all have free will choice inside of us, and at the heart of this, what I keep saying over and over around the world is this is a spiritual fight first between the light and the dark. And in our hearts, each one of us, every day, we can pick and choose the light. That's why I named this book, Choosing the Light, and why Ole, independently made his website, Light on Conspiracies. If we hold that light, Sarah, a lot of people go, what can we do? I'm just a truck driver. I'm some waitress, I know the world's messed up. I know there's problems. What can we do, Cody? We're just little people. And I say, well, I am too. But what you can do is hold that light and connect to source. I'm not talking about religion or all that. I'm talking about connecting to the creative source in the universe, the power that runs through all things, whales, dolphins, trees. If we can connect to that and hold that light and hold truth, then enough of us together can change this darkness that's been going for decade after decade. I mean, how many of these false flags over, like Ole says, it just gets so boring. It's over and over and over.
Well, the problem is the poor people that are sacrificed in those false flags. And even worse is the networks of evil, the drug running, the human trafficking, the organ trafficking, but the pedophilia. Were you involved at all or saw any of the pedophilia networks?
Down in Arkansas, when there were 3 multiply nested CI operations down there, this is in a time frame of 82 to 85, when Bill and Hillary were operating there. His front was being governor, and her front, Hillary's front, was being at the Rose Law Firm. But they were working for the CIA. And at that point in that op, I had heard people talking about some of the, the pedophile stuff and the sex rings and the cocaine and all that. But I was not involved in that. I have a strict thing, Sarah, if I see anyone abusing a child or, raping one or doing anything, I immediately resort to violence.
Well, that's the natural that's the natural human behavior. It takes a whole nother level of evil to hurt a child.
To answer your question, if I saw any of that, the people would probably be dead. But I did not see it. So, I won't tolerate that under any circumstances. I don't care who it is. I just open up on them with force.
Oh, that's fair. Okay, well, will you guys stick around and do a segment with me for my Patreons?
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Now, how can people get a hold of you and see your work and all that great stuff? And you have a book, Cody, so do your plug here.
Yeah, I have a book. It's a 700-page book. Took 4 years to write. It's Choosing the Light, Dark Secrets of the Oklahoma City Bombing. It has chapters in it about CI mind control and Project Slammer and the Stargate program and various other things. And so people can get that at Ole's website, which is lightonconspiracies.com/Cody. And then I'd like to tell everyone, Ole has a wonderful newsletter every month where when these new false flags come out or new events happen, some of them are not false flags, but he puts evidence and goes through with pictures and stuff, and it's a real good expose of stuff that's going on around the world. And then when you do that, you get also get into his vault, and he can tell you about that, all the research he's done over 30 years it's a treasure trove of information for anyone who's interested in doing some serious research on these subjects.
Well, he gave you a good plug, Ole. Do you have anything to add?
He did indeed. No, I've got my newsletter, just like Cody said, where I try to do it very simple and mostly photos, just pointing out these things that are so important to see, the different clues, the different things that exposes things as, was it sabotage, was it controlled demolition, or was it just an accident, these type of things. In it also, when you sign up, you get access to the archives, and in the archives you can compare to when I predicted things on international radio as well, and then when they actually happened several months later and so on. Because once you start understanding the language, the way they communicate with us, showing us what they're up to, just like a mad serial killer, then once we understand that they actually leave clues, that it gives us the power to be able to expose it before the next one happens. So this is what I really try to focus on. I'm also on Patreon, Twitter, my Facebook page is like an underground headquarter almost when it comes to the drills. I get the information about drills from all over the world. People are sending me, because the drills are more or less always part of a false flag operation. It's not always that the drills are, sometimes the drills are there for your security as a security drill, but if there is a false flag, it will have a drill incorporated in it. So that's one of the things that we have a possibility to expose in time before it happens.
Well, and all that information is up on your website, and then you do almost a daily thing on your Patreon, and you don't charge for this. So Patreon is a way that you get donations and people are on your Patreon. That's how you survive, right?
I travel around in the world as well. I do conferences. I've been to, I think, 15 countries. I try to do everything I can as a one-man band with a small little beautiful team around me to lift this world to the next level. And Patreon is what I do on Patreon is I do what I call Ole's Daylights, and that's sort of like 3 to 5 times a week. I do about what has happened in the world, if something just has happened, if there's any signs, if there's anything to look out for, and so on. But also I try to empower people, also based on Raja Yoga, the science of the mind. About how to deal with difficult situation, how to keep your mind in balance and stay focused, stay high in spirit, and so on, even though you go into very dark areas. And for someone like myself, it's invaluable with this type of very old knowledge, because when you head into the belly of the beast, it gets very scary at times. And that's a good point to be able to stay balanced. So this is what I try to do. So any donations, myself, you, Cody, if you want to support us in making the differences in the world for the absolute best we can do, then please support us in whatever way you want.
Well, thank you so much. And again, we're staying after to do another segment for Patreon.